The Handmaid's Tale. Imagine waking up in a world where your bank account is frozen, your job is gone, your name doesn't matter, all because you're a woman. That's Gilead, a theocratic regime built on scripture twisted into chains, where women aren't citizens but categories, wives in blue, Marthas in green, and handmaids in red. Handmaids exist for one purpose: reproduction. In a collapsing world of infertility, they're vessels, assigned to commanders and their barren wives, forced to undergo ritualized assault cloaked as ceremony. The state doesn't call it rape, it calls it God's will. Our narrators, Offred, literally of Fred, stripped of her own name, remembers the world before. Supermarkets, magazines, her husband Luke, her daughter, memories that ache like phantom limbs. And that's what makes the horror worse. Gilead isn't a fantasy dystopia. It's our world with the volume turned up on every ancient cruelty. The society is obsessed with control. Even language is weaponized. Doctors, professors, freethinkers, executed for treason. Gender treachery punished by death. Books banned, eyes watching from every corner. Neighbors reporting neighbors. But the darkest part isn't the violence, it's how fast people accept it. Women enforcing the same system that crushes them, men convincing themselves they're saviors, people adapting because resistance feels impossible. Offred is caught between two choices: survival through submission or rebellion through risk. Both come at a cost. She finds whispers of resistance, Mayday networks, stolen scraps of writing, small flames in the dark. But freedom? Always just out of reach. Atwood wrote The Handmaid's Tale in 1985, and famously said she didn't invent anything. Every horror in Gilead had already happened somewhere in history. Forced childbearing, book burnings, religious rule, stripped rights. That's what makes it terrifying. It isn't speculative fiction, it's a collage of reality. We're left with a fragile glimpse of hope. A testimony recorded years later, analyzed by scholars who treat Gilead like history. The message? Regimes end. But the trauma lives on. Fahrenheit 451. The fireman's job isn't to put fires out, it's to start them. Guy Montag lives in a world where books are illegal, not because they're dangerous in themselves, but because they're too dangerous to think about. Words stir questions, questions stir doubt, and doubt makes people less obedient. So firemen hunt books, kick down doors, douse shelves with kerosene, and strike the match. The night sky glows with the light of erased ideas. Montag doesn't question this, at first. He burns. He smiles. He goes home to his wife Mildred, who spends her days immersed in parlor walls, giant TV screens that talk back to her. She calls the characters her family reality, fading, entertainment, endless. But then Montag meets Clarice, a strange young woman who doesn't fit. She asks questions. She notices the world. She tastes rain. And for the first time, Montag wonders if maybe the fire isn't keeping people safe. It's keeping them small. The crack begins to spread. Monday secretly saves books. He opens one. The words feel alive, dangerous in a way no fire ever could be. And once you've tasted forbidden thought, you can't go back. The state doesn't just burn books. It burns people who hide them. Monday watches a woman choose to burn with her library rather than live without it. That's when he realizes the truth. Fire doesn't cleanse. It consumes. Montag becomes the hunted. His own colleagues turn against him. His wife betrays him. He runs, carrying fragments of books in his head. And in the wilderness, he discovers others, outcasts who memorize entire works so that when the flames die down, the words will live again. Fahrenheit 451 is terrifying, not because it predicts a world where governments censor ideas, but because it predicts a world where people stop wanting them, where distraction and comfort are enough to erase curiosity, where truth isn't forbidden, it's forgotten. Bradbury wrote it in 1953, but it feels sharper every decade since. Screens replacing conversation, Algorithms telling us what to read, what to watch, what to believe. Books collecting dust while entertainment keeps us busy. At the Mountains of Madness. Few endings in Lovecraft's mythos cut as deeply as at the Mountains of Madness. What begins as a scientific expedition to Antarctica slowly unravels into a revelation that mankind was never the master of Earth. We were, at best, trespassers. The story follows a team of Miskatonic University researchers who journey to the frozen wastes in search of ancient fossils. What they find is beyond comprehension. A lost alien city buried under the ice, filled with cyclopean structures and murals that tell a history older than time itself. These were the Elder Things, a species that colonized Earth before humans ever crawled out of the mud. They shaped life, waged wars with other cosmic horrors, and then declined into ruin. But the deeper the team explores, the more horrifying the picture becomes. The murals tell of slave races gone rogue, like the Shoggoths, massive, amorphous creatures capable of reshaping their bodies at will. Once servants, now uncontrollable. The Shoggoths annihilated their masters in a rebellion that left the alien city hollow and haunted. And in the dark tunnels, the explorers hear a sound that chills the blood. A rhythmic, thunderous echo. Tekeli Lee, Tekeli Lee. The Shoggoths are not gone. The climax isn't just survival, it's revelation. One of the explorers realizes with dawning horror that humanity itself may have been shaped as an afterthought by these alien gods. We are not the pinnacle of creation. We are a failed experiment, one accident away from annihilation if these ancient powers return. When the survivors finally escape, they are broken. The frozen mountains loom behind them like jagged teeth, and the narrator begs future expeditions never to return. Some doors, he warns, are not meant to be opened. Lovecraft's endings are full of ambiguity. The Shoggoths still echo through the caverns. The Elder Things may still linger. And the humans who witness this truth cannot bear to speak it. The story closes not with triumph, but with silence. The kind of silence that comes when you realize your species is insignificant, your world borrowed, your future uncertain. At its heart, At the Mountains of Madness delivers the purest form of cosmic horror, the understanding that the universe is not only indifferent to us, but filled with beings far older, far stronger, and far less merciful than we can ever imagine. The Chrysalids. Imagine a future where the apocalypse already happened. The world was burned in nuclear fire, cities erased. Generations later, humanity claws its way back, not into progress, but into fear. In Labrador, society rebuilds under one iron law: purity. Anything that deviates, a six-legged calf, a crop that grows twisted, even a child born with one finger too many, is declared an abomination, destroyed, cast out to the fringes, because the true image must be preserved, or so the leaders say. David, the boy at the heart of the Chrysalids, grows up repeating this belief. But then he notices something. He and a handful of others aren't like everyone else. Not on the outside, on the inside. They can hear each other. Speak without speaking. Telepaths. At first it feels like a gift, a secret bond. But in a world that kills anything different, it's a death sentence. If they're discovered, they won't be seen as the next step in human evolution. They'll be hunted. And soon, David realizes just how fragile survival is. His younger sister Sophie hides an extra toe. Just one. When it's discovered, the punishment is brutal. It doesn't matter that she's a child, or kind, or innocent. One small deviation makes her a monster in the eyes of her own community. That's the true horror here. Not radiation, not ruins, not even the harsh wilderness beyond the walls. It's fear weaponized into law. A society so obsessed with purity that it destroys itself generation after generation, unable to adapt, unwilling to evolve. As the story unfolds, David and the other telepaths are forced to flee, hunted by their families, their church, their government. And the chilling truth, there are others like them. hidden across the world. Mutations that aren't accidents, but the future trying to be born. The Chrysalids is dark not because it shows us monsters, but because it shows us ourselves, our tribal instinct to reject the different, our history of witch hunts, eugenics, purges. Wyndham holds up a mirror and asks, if the next stage of humanity was standing right in front of you, would you embrace it? Or would you destroy it to keep things the same? Wuthering Heights. On the surface, Wuthering Heights is a love story, but to call it that alone would be an insult. Emily Bronte wrote something far more brutal, a novel about obsession, revenge, and the way love, when poisoned, can rot everything around it. The story begins with Heathcliff, an orphan taken into the Earnshaw family. He grows up alongside Catherine, who becomes the center of his world. Their love is wild, primal, and untamed, bound not by society's rules, but by something darker, almost supernatural. Yet Catherine, torn between passion and status, marries the refined Edgar Linton instead. To Heathcliff, this isn't just betrayal. It's a wound that festers until it consumes him. What follows is not romance, but destruction. Heathcliff vanishes, only to return years later, wealthy, hardened, and filled with a single purpose: revenge. He dismantles the lives of everyone around him, marrying Edgar's sister to spite him, taking control of both Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, and slowly bending Catherine's world to ruin. But Catherine herself is no innocent victim. She admits she cannot live without Heathcliff, declaring their souls are the same. Yet her choices chain them both to misery. When she dies young, her ghost haunts Heathcliff, and his torment grows. His obsession with her memory drives him to madness, clawing at her grave, begging her spirit never to leave him. The novel spirals into a generational curse, where the sins of the parents bleed into the lives of their children. Only through the eventual union of Catherine's daughter and Hareton Earnshaw does some fragile sense of peace begin to form. But even then, the moors remain restless, and tales of Heathcliff's spirit wandering beside Catherine's linger like fog on the hills. Bronte's genius lies in her refusal to romanticize. Love in Wuthering Heights is not tender or redemptive. It is violent, selfish, and destructive, a storm as relentless as the Yorkshire moors themselves. Heathcliff and Catherine are not heroes. They are forces of nature, locked in a cycle of passion and vengeance that no grave can contain. Riddley Walker. Picture England, but not as you know it. Not castles, knights, or the London skyline. Instead, a country thousands of years after nuclear war burned the world down. The cities are gone. Technology is dust. Civilization didn't climb forward. It fell backward into something that looks like the Dark Ages, but twisted. Even language has collapsed. Words are fractured, mutated over centuries of survival. The entire novel is written in that broken tongue, forcing you to stumble through the same rubble as its characters. Reading it is like walking through ruins, where every sentence is another piece of shattered history you're trying to glue back together. In this world, stories are all that's left. And stories are dangerous, because when knowledge breaks, myths grow in its place. Nuclear power becomes the one big one. Science is remembered through puppet shows. History is retold as ritual, superstition, half-truth. And in this fragile world of scraps and shadows, one boy stumbles into a truth too heavy for him to hold. That boy is Riddley Walker, just 12 years old, orphaned, and already carrying the weight of a civilization that barely remembers itself. When Riddley discovers relics of old technology, he sees the spark of knowledge. But in this world, knowledge isn't just power, it's temptation. Because the more people dig into the secrets of the past, the closer they come to repeating it, pushing the same button that destroyed everything before. Hoban's book is that it doesn't show the apocalypse. It shows the shadow of it centuries later, burned into the soil, twisted into the culture. And the horror isn't just survival in a wasteland, it's the cycle. The creeping realization that history doesn't climb in a straight line, it circles. That humanity might be destined to rediscover fire, worship it, and then burn itself all over again. By the end, you're left with a chilling echo. The future doesn't look like rockets, skyscrapers, or progress. It looks like ruins, children playing with puppets, and words so broken they can barely hold meaning. Because maybe the apocalypse isn't one event, maybe it's a rhythm, and maybe we're already marching to its beat. Riddley Walker is one of the darkest visions of all because it isn't about the end of the world. It's about what happens long after. It's about how myths replace memory, how language itself can rot, and how even children, born in the ashes, can't escape the fire that waits ahead. The Man from the Train. One of the most terrifying killers in American history hid on the railroads. The Man from the Train isn't fiction, it's true crime. But it reads like a nightmare stretched across decades. From the 1890s into the 1910s, dozens of families in small towns across America were slaughtered in their homes. Always the same way, always with an axe. The police thought they were random, local tragedies, unconnected bursts of violence, but historian Bill James and his daughter Rachel looked closer. The dates, the places, the details, they lined up like tracks. And what they uncovered was horrifying. It wasn't dozens of killers. It was one. A man who traveled the rails. The signature was unmistakable. Families murdered at night in isolated houses near train tracks. Oil lamps covered with cloth to mask the light. The blunt side of an axe used to kill quickly and brutally. And the weapon left behind, as if the killer wanted people to know it was him. Then he'd vanish on the first train out of town, leaving behind silence, blood, and questions. Among the crimes tied to him, the infamous Villisca axe murders of 1912, where 8 people, including 6 children, were butchered in their beds. A case that baffled investigators for over a century. James's research argues it was the same drifter who had left a trail of bodies from Oregon to Florida. But here's the darkest part. The Man from the Train wasn't just a killer. He was a phantom in an era where police records were weak. Communication between towns was slow, and forensic science barely existed. A man could murder an entire family, hop a midnight train, and be states away before dawn. By the time detectives realized what happened, the killer was already gone. Bill James believes he even found the killer's name, Paul Muller, a German immigrant wanted for murdering a Massachusetts family in 1897 before disappearing onto the rails. The descriptions, the timing, the method, they all matched. If true, Muller could be one of the most prolific serial killers in history. More deaths than Jack the Ripper, Ted Bundy, and John Wayne Gacy combined. What makes this book so haunting isn't just the murders. It's how many were forgotten. How small-town families, erased in a single night, never became household names. How their tragedies became local stories instead of part of a massive, hidden pattern. And how close America came to never piecing it together. The Man from the Train forces us to ask, how many crimes go unseen because we don't connect the dots? How many killers slip through the cracks of history? And how many monsters walked freely? Their names never known. Their shadows never caught. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. On the surface, John Barrett's Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil feels like a portrait of Savannah, Georgia, a city drenched in charm, eccentricity, and Southern Gothic atmosphere. But beneath the magnolias and the Spanish moss, it becomes something darker, a true crime story wrapped in folklore, where reality blurs with myth. At its heart lies a murder. Jim Williams, a wealthy antiques dealer, stands trial for killing Danny Hansford, a young male prostitute and Williams' lover. Was it self-defense, or was it calculated? The book doesn't just examine the courtroom drama. It weaves the entire city into the narrative, as if Savannah itself were on trial. And what a city it is! Barrett paints Savannah as a living character. Aristocrats sipping cocktails on verandas, voodoo priestesses whispering in graveyards, con men, drag queens, and recluses, all performing in a theater of the strange. The title itself comes from a photograph of a statue in the city's Bonaventure Cemetery, a girl holding two bowls, eternally balanced between good and evil. That duality defines everything in the story. The brilliance of Baranda's writing is that the murder becomes less about guilt and innocence and more about the line between respectability and decay. Jim Williams embodies Savannah's old wealth and refinement, yet his private life, his secrets, his desires, his manipulations, reveals something far messier. The city is the same, beautiful on the surface, haunted underneath. Williams is tried multiple times, acquitted, only to die mysteriously in the very house where the murder took place. The city continues on, lush and languid, as if the tragedy were just another layer of its mythology. That's why Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil lingers. It isn't simply a murder story. It's a meditation on appearances, morality, and the ghosts, literal and metaphorical, that wander southern soil. Berendt invites us into Savannah's midnight hour, where charm and menace walk hand in hand, and where good and evil are less opposites than inseparable twins. Also, sorry for the late upload.